This week, there is nothing meek about Mary's data. Growth hackers, beware.
In fact, the Code Conference was a festival of battles. Spotify versus Facebook, AT&T versus the FTC, and Murdoch against, well, who knows?
And then there was the internet. We can just blame the web.
All that plus Roseanne and Twitter, free speech or hate speech.
We've got all the play-by-play this week on FuFWD, so let's launch.
Howdy.
So Gene, before we even, we'll do loving and hating first, and then we've got a whole Code Conference show of lots of little gritty detail and some behind-the-scenes stuff that people don't know about. But let's just start right in with loving and hating, because I know you've got a good loving and a good hating this week.
Yeah, and in studying up for the Code Conference discussion, I was influenced by a few things. So I'll reference in advance and hopefully not spoiler alert. So loving. Let's start with loving. Loving.
Love away.
Love away. Venmo is basically what I'm loving this week, and it's influenced by a few different things. Partly because in my personal life with college and high school aged kids, and being in a suburban town between that and the city, there's a lot of money micropayment stuff that Venmo has made very easy. And what I love about Venmo more than anything, and there's going to be a footnote, is that it's breathtakingly simple. And I know that's the case when a whole bunch of suburban dads and moms start using it, and they can exchange $20 for a cab, $40 for a shared ride, and it involves the teenagers too. It's simple. It was almost so simple I thought it was bad at first, but it really, really has done well. And anyone who hasn't used it has to realize these are the things that are starting to make the world a little easier. Now, they've been acquired, and they're going to be learning what it's like under PayPal. That'll be interesting. There's a habit of companies disappearing. But what do you think about those guys?
So I was shocked when I saw them for the first time, and people started saying Venmo. I thought it didn't roll off my tongue. I thought it's not really that great a word, but it has been, I think, simple and incredibly effective, and I'm a fan.
Yeah, and it's amazing how these things that we've predicted and talked about for decades don't happen, and then somebody just comes along and does it just as we define. Nothing more than just execution. So flip side of that, what I'm hating this week, and I'm going to do a caveat on this too, is Nextdoor. Nextdoor is this neighborhood community localized site that has attempted to bring together and bring the benefits of the internet and communications at a local level across. It's sort of like if you took a hybrid of Zillow, the real estate, and Facebook, and shook them up with a little meetup thrown in. Now the problem, the elegant thing is that the structure and the framework is excellent. If you can see in some of these slides that we provided, the good news is it's set up with a little map idea. They attach it to Facebook. They do things that help you communicate with each other. However, I was a leader of my neighborhood in trying to get this in, and it's just a dud. The problem, as we've said a lot with all kind of community and social sites, is they don't work in empty rooms. And the problem is a very, very small percentage. And they go around, and it's in the Mary Meeker slides we'll look at in a few minutes. They're among the harbingers of, 1,500 neighborhoods are now connected through Nextdoor and everything. The problem is if all those are connected with only 10% people in each neighborhood using it, it's just a joke. So it's another kind of venture that has great aspirations, is doing okay, but ironically, you're better off in the moms group in my neighborhood at Facebook, even as a dad.
All right, so let's just jump right into Recode. So for our listeners who don't know what Recode is, it is the 800-pound gorilla tech conference.
Yeah.
Originally founded as All Things D, and then retitled when the founders got out of their deal with the Wall Street Journal. Here's the thing. I just wanted to put you on the spot as a conference guy from the earliest days of the internet. Like, what happens behind the scenes when you say to somebody, "I want you to come speak"? Do they negotiate like?
And it's a little bit like how executives and maybe human beings are, in the sense that you have all types. And there's no doubt about it that there are the corporate lackeys who basically have to operate by a very tight, or at least they think they do, by a tightly PR controlled, process. And sometimes they're gatekeepers and sometimes there aren't. But rather than going really in depth, there's that against the free agency status of every basic human being. And so you have both people that will almost act like a PR gatekeeper for themselves, and those executives that you can just have a phone call with and they'll just do things that'll make their PR people's heads explode. So, but that being said, there's leverage here, and there's about controversies that might be discussed. There's about things that you might want to announce. And it's always the tension between controlling and being critical. And I have to applaud Mary Meeker, Kara Swisher, and the legacy of Walt Mossberg, who really have taken hard-ass journalist approach for the most part to this, and made such a good conference that you kind of have to show up, and you will be exposed if you don't. So that's sort of step one. I won't go in too far in depth, but since the .com era, the world's kind of split out because of the explosion of startup universe. So the business executive strategic big conversations that make the press, Recode owns. And it should be noted that Recode used to be called D, which was part of the Wall Street Journal, and what a boon it was for them that they probably regret losing. And the startup world is probably controlled by the tech crunches of the world, and there's a lot of money in that too. So I don't know.
This is the first year that Peter Kafka is kind of the co-host now that Walt's stepped down, and Peter's no easy interview either. I mean, he always seems like he's about to jump out of his chair and strangle somebody.
Yeah, and I do believe in the era when a lot of these are now available on video, which we used to sell at Jupiter as a byproduct rather than there being any YouTube for it to be used as exposure. The dynamic at a personal level and the tension is as important and entertaining as anything. I would point anyone to the Sheryl Sandberg and Kara Swisher tension, which has 5 or 7 things going on at once. If you are even remotely a student of this stuff, from feminist tension that's a little kind of unfortunate to talk to the hand, PR from Facebook. Sheryl can't quite let her guard down, and to Kara just wanting to be a hard ass and not brook any less.
So let's jump right into that interview because it was really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, she said, so it begins with her saying to Sandberg, "I told you this is going to be tough."
Right.
And then she really just kind of comes unglued on her and wants, says, "Why wasn't someone fired for Cambridge Analytica?"
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I've ever seen that question asked anywhere else.
No, she asks it straightforwardly and directly, and I would say I wouldn't be surprised if Kara has some regrets because she did go a little too far at one point and, got almost a little bit personal, which is sometimes when you know too much, can kind of happen. But that's kind of what I love about events in general versus the canned press, which is there's an immediacy and anything can happen. It's almost like reality television for internet executives.
So did you think that Sheryl, did she win any points in that, or was it just rehashing the press release from 3 weeks ago and the apology tour?
I think there were no substantive points made either way. They put the walls up where the walls needed to be. There was some interesting dynamic between her and her colleague on that stage. They were kind of almost jousting before they got it together and got a grip on things. And I think Sheryl benefited sympathetically from Kara being maybe a little too mean.
It's very funny. So anything else? Or should we? There was a lot of news. So the first day of Recode, there was a lot of news. I mean,
yeah, go on.
I mean, I thought Senator Mark Warner showing up was interesting and a surprise. Not really a tech guy, but seemed to have plenty to say.
Yeah, well, I think there's a history of tech of political people using tech events to kind of burnish their reputation one way or the other. And it sometimes feels a little bit self-evident, which is very different than somebody like an Al Gore showing up for certain reasons at TED. And we probably should put the backdrop of TED here too, because, in a way, that's the big thinkers event. And I think the fact that these are hard nailed interviews that can make news is as important, as anything. But yeah, I think day one was interesting. I'm forgetting for a second, day one, day two, the Murdoch, was that day two? Uber, kind of interesting.
Well, hold on. Let's. I want to drill down on one. So let's drill down on the AT&T Randall Stephenson
Sure.
day one interview. He's not. He's a phone guy.
Yes.
Like, he's not a Valley. He's not. He's not in the crowd, and so for him, he's trying to like hang out with the cool kids, but it was really interesting to hear him present himself and AT&T as kind of late to the party and struggling to catch up. Like, he definitely seemed jealous, is the only word I can think of. Jealous of Netflix, jealous of Amazon.
That's right.
He kept talking about having a direct customer relationship in content. And
I thought there was a lot of media training for the digital age fed or injected into him. And, I think you nailed it. He's a kind of an old style bureaucrat from the telecom area, which is so funny because that's a few steps removed from the cable and the ISP world, which itself are viewed as kind of dinosaur-like within the more proper digital, and digital content world. So I think that, that's why these things are a little bit interesting, because there's a little ego there that was personal rather than just about, AT&T. But I also think if they're really going to be a diversified asset holder going forward in the digital age, he does not seem like the right person at the helm.
Well, he went out of his way to compliment, all of the content people. He rolled names off his tongue, Richard Plepler at HBO, and he really wanted it to be clear that he wasn't pretending to be them.
Right.
But I was surprised that his what I thought of AT&T's kind of critical digital relationship with the former Fox folks. They have a $500 million investment in a Valley-based, LA-based operation. Names just, it doesn't matter. But I was surprised that wasn't mentioned.
Yeah, no, and I think the ground could have been covered a little more interestingly and diversely. It's very hard to say a lot about that without kind of picking him apart.
And I don't think there's any necessarily point in picking him apart either.
Yeah, too easy.
Yeah, right, fair enough. So what about Spotify?
Well, I think that Spotify, it's apt to be talking about this right here, because in this whole world of taking yourself out in public and media training and events and what you can see through, you've got Spotify, who's trying to carve out some kind of a do no harm process of going through its IPO. And I think that this is a very fraught time for them, because in a way, and I guess that's what makes it almost painful to watch, because there are many, many more bad things that can happen than good things at this stage for Spotify, right? More than anything, they want steady as she goes. They want to still be the definitive, the hegemony of the space. They don't want to, and there have been a lot of rough, sloppy IPOs lately among tech giants, even if they've righted themselves, and not all have righted themselves, right? If the worst case scenario for them is a Facebook-like IPO that they recover from because they're so far ahead of anyone, great.
By the way, the AT&T money is the churn-in money, was what I was meaning to say earlier. Yeah. Which did not come up in the interview, by the way.
No. I think he's jealous of Chernin, because Chernan's a guy who's remade himself from cable world as at least an acceptable digital guy.
Jealous of churning is good. I like that. That could be a headline. All right. So the other pointy thing out of day one, which was Snapchat definitely came out guns blazing. We're not just gonna the redesign. Kara went out of her way to say my kids don't like your redesign.
Yeah. But it was a. Let's see, what's the inverse of a backhanded compliment? It was a complimentary backhand, really, because in a way, it was a testament to, but they're using it 24/7 for everything.
Yeah, right, exactly right. Yeah,
and B, I have to say, Evan was very impressive. He was very engaging and likable, but he was also kind of you got the impression that he was just humbly hiding some whip smartness, but saying very sane things. His point is very well taken, that as roughly and brutally as they've been treated, they're just taking the long view. And when they first came out with advertising models, they got lacerated, but that turned out to be the right thing. And they're confident that they're just making mindful, thoughtful decisions, and everyone's going to be okay with it. And that's why the redesign is currently in the stage of, misunderstanding. So I don't know, it's like, as a public company, newly minted kind of CEO, that's kind of almost a best case scenario for a stock and a company set of fundamentals that are a little wobbly.
I guess.
I'm sorry, I went too far. Did you
No, well, no,
he didn't hold up well?
Well, I mean, I thought what he said, which was valid and interesting, was essentially, when you're an ad-driven business, which is what Facebook is, and you're willing to kind of force people to add friends endlessly, you end up with this big muddy set of relationships in which you can't be intimate or authentic because you're getting, you're sharing with people you met at a conference once, and he was. I thought his take on Facebook was pretty well founded.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I actually have to separate my sense of his, performance, which is not just surface. There's substance values there too, from what remain the, the fundamental issues that Snapchat is facing, biggest among which is this transition from private sharing to something that approaches a more, honestly, Facebook-like big, broad, scalable picture. And I don't think they've reconciled that yet, even while allowing lots of marketers into the party.
Before we move on to the Mary Meeker slides, which are going to be a big chunk of conversation, anything else that stood out from you? Any other conversations? Any headlines that were important?
Yeah, I would say we didn't get exposed to more than a snippet of it on video, and I can't remember how I pawed my way there. But there was a panel of women tech executives that I thought was kind of wonderful and made me want more. And it included one of my favorite all-time people in tech, Megan Smith, who was for a long time the CTO of the government under Obama. But before that, she's actually kind of a star. We may have already talked about this in a movie about General Magic. She was a whiz kid tech person in the late 80s, early 90s, but has done many, many, many things since then. And she's a longtime friend and sometime partner of Kara Swisher, and so the tension, they were actually really neat together for those few minutes, in addition to some of the other women on the panel. So I would point people to that, and I'm really excited to see what Megan is going to do next. Anyway.
All right, so let's get to the Mary Meeker slides. For those of us in the audience who don't understand, can you just give us the background on how long this has been going on?
Yeah, so it's easier to sort of state the current status and rewind, which is to say that Mary Meeker, now going on probably, you could say 10 years / 20 years, has come out with an annual state of the internet globally that is a 100 to 300 slide presentation that races across the entire landscape systematically, uses barely a hair's breadth of original data, but combines everything into a view that's kind of become, okay, the Bible is out for this year. Were you in it? What was said? What were the reference points? Now, in the world of SlideShare and PowerPoint presentations, why I said 10/20 years is for 10 years or more, it's been a deck, a presentation that has become gospel. And before that, and this kind of marks her current existence at the Kleiner Perkins venture capital firm. Before that, she was an investment banker researcher at Morgan Stanley for many years and was the official rock star in residence, declaiming one way or the other on the internet industry and the .com. And that would be a book that would get produced that was a research document once a year. And so I just admire how she puts things together. It's a little dry. And for those of us that are in the journalism or feature or research or coverage area, you sometimes gnash your teeth at, what is she saying? Don't underestimate that. I've pushed a slide forward that I think represents the best of what she does, which is combining other pieces of extant data to tell a story that has not been told yet, and sometimes to do that from a high perch.
So I saw the slide. This is slide 18 on her deck, and I pulled it up. And for those of you who are watching video, you'll see it on the screen. But for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why you found this interesting, which is why I was excited to have you illuminate.
So here's the thing. What I know from looking at that, and sometimes you can just judge by the size of the fine print underneath, is that she's cobbled together data, and I have not gone through and said this makes sense, this doesn't, because there's apples to apples, orange to oranges. She's cobbled together data from many points to try to tell a complete story of what the balance of the transactions that are happening are. What are the nature of them? What's the, where do they come from? Who are the companies that are winning this? And you don't often get that in a world where, and this is one of the challenges of her very document in this day and age. Who cares how many people are in the internet right now? At a small company or an individual startup or even a consumer level, what does it matter to me? I like this because it introduces the idea of I'm bringing together disparate sources and I'm creating a composite view. And so maybe that's the best way to think about it, is composite views. Sometimes mashups is what other people have called. She does good mashups of other data.
So if you had to boil the deck down into one word, I think I have a word that is the Mary Meeker word of 2018. And maybe you'll disagree. And again, it's a lot of slides, and you probably see different things in the numbers than I do. But I thought that the word of the year was slowing.
Yeah, slowing or resting. Yeah.
Right? Which is a little scary.
Yeah. Well, in a high growth world, and investments are, this is the single difference between looking at the world holistically 20 years ago from today. It's now so driven by capital markets and investment outcomes, which is not reflective at all of success or relevance in our culture, at least not in a direct sense. And so what that says is it's about growth. You can be successful and profitable, but if you're not growing, it doesn't even matter, right? So this is sort of this inherent problem. And I think it's led to a little bit of woodenness. She is historically wooden in general anyway, but if you're just a straight reporter of the facts, that can tell a marvelous story. There's a little lack of, I find the answer to your analysis, which I agree with, to be that there wasn't much of anything to say, because there isn't a theme that's bringing things together up front, except what looked like an attempt to tamp the potential fire around security issues that seems to have finally started to bubble over in the last few years with the election and other kinds of things. So I don't know.
So let's speak about that for a second. So again, I wasn't at the conference. I don't know what was being said in the, at the cocktail parties or, among friends around the table. But at least in terms of the presentations that I saw, given how much the last 12 months have been about politics, I felt politics was pretty much not on stage, which is a little surprising to me, given the fact that, Kara is no,
Yeah.
shrinking violet when it comes to politics.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true. And I think you have to, you wonder sometimes how, whether things have run their course or not. And by that, I'm referring to Mary Meeker at Kleiner Perkins itself. And
Interesting.
And in the back, relative to Kleiner Perkins, John Doerr, who has pretty much been the symbolic and literal figurehead at different times of Kleiner Perkins forever, is the godfather more than almost anyone else of Silicon Valley today. He's pretty political. He can be pretty edgy and political and outspoken about things. But I think that Kleiner has had a few tough years on that end with some sexist claims and some partner issues and some lawsuits. Maybe they're just a little not wanting to have that stuff be front and center. But it could be us reading too much into it. It could just be a miss, because if she's going to be wooden about this, she's not going to capture the more nuanced side, which we're going to get to in a second with Roseanne Barr, where the numbers can't always tell the story about this sort of area around influence and fake news and
but you know what? Let's just make that pivot, because if the Code Conference ate up a lot of the oxygen of the week, the only other thing that filled my feeds was Roseanne.
Yeah.
And and it went through a whole bunch of really fast iterations. First it happened, and then ABC responded really fast, and then the internet responded really fast, and then Roseanne blamed Ambi. I mean, it's just like, when the smoke clears, was it political correctness? Because that was the pushback, was, it's political correctness that's shutting Roseanne down.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, well, first of all, I think you nailed it in the initial description. It was a breathtaking 24 to 48, if not 6 or 12 hour news cycle, like completely showing where the world is today, that this can be so powerful and explosive and go through so many left turns within a 12 to 24 hour period. I do feel that that I've often said the internet is the ultimate world of and you've got equal and opposite things coexisting, but be very wary about those things getting mushed up. And I think this is the people that make rumor and gossip and over push this thing are those that are like the beneficiaries of conflation, right? There's a big difference between what Roseanne said as an entertainer, or even what Sam B said a few days later, and then the responses to these things, and whether they're political, and even what Roseanne says on her show versus what she says in her personal life. I think that ABC did the right thing, and they have every right to do what they want, right? This is a little Holly lobby in the sense that you can do whatever you want, and it's up to them. And maybe it was the wrong decision, but even though it was a fast decision, it was a long view that they were taking, and they didn't want to have a piece of something that was short-term profits for a popular show.
Yeah, I have to say I'm probably the wrong person to weigh in on this, because I didn't see the show. I never watched it.
Yeah.
Now supposedly there's a rumor they're going to reboot it without her.
Right. Yeah, and with Melissa Gilbert, who's the more outspoken. There's personal angles to this that are kind of really interesting. In the wake of the story, most of us that aren't tracking this day to day in the media business were made aware that the big decision at ABC was made by one of the first African Americans to lead a major network in a major way, and that there was a certain amount of like, no way we're going to accept this, and that. But I find it hard to believe that she would have such sway to make a personal decision. It was just the right decision, and she was influenced to move fast. The criticisms are absurd, of the decision for them to do that. I mean, it's really up to them. They're saying bye-bye to the revenues they're going to get. So, they kind of want to make a point here.
All right, so we've got time for just one last, extra credit conversation, but I think it's an important one. For our listeners that don't know what GitHub is,
Yeah.
GitHub is the preeminent, most important connecting place where people that write code and share snippets of code with other people can publish it. It's a great big open source. It's elegant. It's well built. It functions. I guess I didn't realize that it was privately held, but I guess I never really thought about it.
Yeah, it's
I
kind
don't know
of
how.
you almost neglect for a certain reason to think of it even as a startup. It feels like a public trust sitting there.
Wikipedia.
So to hear that that Andreessen Horowitz are going to make a fortune off of it is like, wow, of course, right? It's very much seems like it makes sense in retrospect. It's sort of like I think of it as almost like a Reddit for the development community, but one that touches farther into the front end world of startups and digital companies than you realize. I, a non-programmer, non-coder, have spent a lot of time there over the last 3 to 5 years and have grown to just love it, even if I didn't understand half of what was going on in there. So,
Well, and here's the bad news. So it was bought by Microsoft.
yeah,
And let's just take a moment and say with some sadness that
right.
Microsoft bought Skype and they fucked it up.
Yep.
I mean, they made you have to, it got complicated. You have to register through your Microsoft account and it got muddy and it still functions okay, but it's not fabulous. So will Microsoft fuck up GitHub?
It's a really, really good question. I pray that they have the wherewithal and the understanding to leave it alone. There are points of leverage that they are entitled to and can be harmless. They can promote within the channel. They can do certain things. But boy, if they try to force feed this into, your Exchange account, log on and authorization, like I think one of the things that they have gnashed their teeth about, Microsoft, the last 5 to 7 years, as the legacy of Outlook and your Microsoft email goes away, is an Outlook, is to see that, forget about even Facebook, that your Google account, and your Gmail can become part of your authorization. You don't have to sign in. You just use your Google account, and that's more of a generic open source feeling thing. But if they shut you into a narrow world on this, it will be really, really bad. And I don't know. I completely agree with you. I think it's so obvious that they hopefully will not mess this up too much.
All right. Well, we are out of time. We've had a good week. For the first week in June, surprisingly full of news, and the future will continue to come at us over the next 7 days, and then we'll be back.
It always rolls forward, and as always, we should also just ask people to spread the word, like us, follow us, subscribe to us, share it on your Facebook and Twitter with other people, because this is our 30th show, and we're starting to really like this.
Yeah, for sure. Have a good week.
All right, you too, Steve. Bye.